Welcome to another episode of Inside the Line, Real Stories by Real Cops. I'm Dave Rattigan, across from Dale Lawrence, retired police officer, and our guest today is Paul D'Angelo, one of the best comedians in Boston, CDs, books, works across the country at various times, just about retired, Boston Magazine's award for Best of Boston Comedian, and at once upon a time, he was also a DA by day and a comedian by night. DA Paul Murphy, ADA actually in Essex County, prosecutor is what it is, prosecutor. And you were an assistant district
DA,
attorney.
yeah, there's one DA for the whole county of Essex who was Kevin Burke at the time, and I was assistant DA.
You were in the Peabody courtroom at one point and prosecuted people and
I started in Salem District Court. Then they sent me to Amesbury. It was my first supervisory position, and back then Amesbury was a sub shop, and that's about it.
Oh, yeah.
And I was there for about 6 months with Judge who was there? Was Judge Rendazzo, who was a great guy, but boy, he was slow as could be. And I called him up. I had just started doing comedy. I said, I quit if you don't get me out of here. Get me out of Amesbury. So they sent me to Haverhill. So I supervised Haverhill Court, and then they sent me to Lynn. I supervised the Lynn District Court. Then I supervised the Salem jury and eventually the Peabody jury.
How long were you a DA?
11 years.
Okay.
And can I ask
and
you
a
a question?
defense attorney for about 4 years before I moved to L.A.
Yeah, I got a quick question.
Sure.
So, as a former cop, I can spot someone who looks like a criminal, white-collar criminal, sex offender, domestic violence offender. When you look at Dave Rattigan across from you, which category does he fall into? Murderer, maybe? What does he look like to you?
Dave doesn't. No, he doesn't. No, he's pretty innocent. He doesn't even steal jokes.
Oh, okay. So you're a non-criminal. That's good, Dave.
But they're the ones you got to worry about.
It blends right into the environment.
Yeah, it's funny because I was watching this thing on serial killers, and Ted Bundy's best friend said I would want him to go out with my sister. I mean, I had no idea. His whole family had no idea. So these guys, they live among us.
Yeah, there you go, Dave.
The closest people do them. And so guys like you who look very innocuous, innocent, who knows what dark secrets, maybe a gimp in the basement.
I got my eye on you, Rattigan.
I've got plans.
Probably got a gimp in the basement with a rubber ball in his mouth. Who knows?
We're going to talk about a couple of cases that have been in the news. We're going to talk about the sentencing of the other three cops in the Chauvin case and something really heinous that's later on. Let me ask you this. And I know Dale's had this situation, too, where he runs into somebody on the street. Well, tell us. You run into somebody on the street and
because I actually ran into a guy and he says, hey, do you know Paul D'Angelo? I said, well, why would you like me to answer that question? He goes, well, he put me away about 30 years and he just got out and he wants to know where your next comedy show is.
Boy, he's got a long memory.
Yeah, I have run into people on the street that I've arrested or just dealt with. I was literally in Salem, Massachusetts the other day in the Dunkin' Donuts drive-thru. Two young kids, probably in their 20s. One of them looked at me and says, you're a former cop, aren't you? I go, not me, my friend. He goes, yes, you are. You used to work on the North Shore. I said, how'd you remember? He goes, I remember when you worked in the high school when I was a 15-year-old kid. So he remembered me, but it was in a positive light.
Right.
Absolutely. I've dealt with people at
the one?
At Stop and Shop. There was a young kid all drugged out, and I was with my wife and kids when they were younger. And the kid was giving me the eyeball, and he was giving me a hard time. So I picked up a can of Easy Off oven cleaner, and I told my kids if this kid gets close to us, I'm going to spray it in his face and see what happens next.
Oh, nice.
Well, you ever run into that when you were a prosecutor?
You mentioned my two names. My real name is, even though I'm mostly Italian, my real last name is Murphy, Paul Murphy. I used a different name because my friends in college used to call me Angelo because everything about me was Italian other than my last name and the drinking. And so when I went up to do comedy for the first time, I said, I don't know if they'll allow me to do this in the DAs. I'm like the Jackie Robinson of DAs doing comedy. So I'm breaking new ground here. And so I said, well, I can't be Angelo because I wouldn't answer to that name. I said, well, I'll just be Paul. I'm gonna do this once anyway. So I ended up not doing it once, obviously, and back then I used to headline, I can remember particularly a time at Stevie D's on 114, which was the hot place at the time, and the waitress coming over to me and saying, I just want you to know that the two guys at my table, I overheard them say, he looks like the guy who sent me to prison.
They must have been from Lawrence, Massachusetts.
But that guy was Irish and this guy's Italian, so it can't be him. I go, I got to keep those two names. I got to keep the names separate, yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I have two stories about this. I have one story from when you were a defense attorney, because you were a defense attorney for a couple of years. And I have another story. I did a show. I was booking a show for a while for a well-known motorcycle club. And I said, there's a great guy who would be great for your show, but he used to be a prosecutor.
HA, are those the
I'm
initials
not
for
saying.
them? Because I was friends. I did shows for them.
I'm not. Did you really?
Yeah. When who was the head? He used to come to my shows. He passed away. He was the head of.
I think he was out of Lynn, Massachusetts.
Exactly.
Wasn't he?
Absolutely was.
I can't remember his name.
Recall his name. Yeah. Oh yeah. He came to my show. I'll remember on the way home.
Yeah. So they came to comedy clubs.
No. I did a show.
You went to
show.
The clubhouse?
At the clubhouse.
No, not the club. I forget where it was, but it was something.
It was in Lynn and Westland. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And then the other one was a defense attorney. You may remember this one in Salem at Dick Doherty's club in Salem. I'm with Paul. There were two shows. There's a guy in the first show. It doesn't really matter that there were two, but there's a guy at the show, and he's a really big guy, and he's drunk. And he's heckling he has no idea he's ruining the show. He's very good-natured about it. And he's just shouting stuff out. And I'm sitting in the back with Paul. The other guy was on. And Paul says, yeah, he goes, I defended him on a drunk driving charge.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I said, nah, nice job, Paul. Nice job. Nice job.
Well, you know what? As a prosecutor, I wasn't overzealous, or I was fair. I was fair. So I wasn't one of those way over the top. My job was to see justice done. So I don't think I was one of those people that someone was going to have a grudge against, because most of the people, if I put them away, they knew what they did, and I didn't really have any trouble with people coming after me.
Okay, so
I was kind of the opposite as a cop. I did absolutely nothing. Just let everyone go, and sooner or later they'll screw up again, and there'll be another cop in another city that'll catch them.
And it's his problem. Yeah,
there you go.
That's you're like Batman, but not really. Okay, let me get this. This is the Floyd killing case, the George Floyd killing. Horrible tragedy, going to be probably an historic moment in policing. The three other cops who were there when George Floyd killed by Derek Chauvin, they were tried last week. They were found guilty of violating Floyd's civil rights. They haven't been sentenced yet, but it could be life sentence possible. Two of them actually took part. One of them held his legs, and the other one two of them held him down while Chauvin killed him. Would this have happened in 94? And how often do the events at large...
Are you asking if it's politically motivated, this thing?
Is it politically motivated, or is it just the kind of tragedy that would have been dealt with this way?
Well, you know what? In this case, I mean, if you look at the case, yeah, they were wrong and everything like that, but there's mitigating circumstances and everything like that. Life sentences, I absolutely, that's politically motivated to some extent. I mean...
what about the guilty verdict?
I always hate commenting on verdicts. When people ask me, I say, unless you've sat in that jury box and listened to all the evidence, I don't feel qualified to give a, they'll take, weeks of testimony. Yeah. They'll ask you, based on the news reports and the newspapers that you read and everything, like, what's your opinion? I go, well, I have an opinion, but I said it's not definitive, because unless you've sat in that room and listened to every bit of evidence, I think it's presumptuous to say, whether it's a good verdict or not.
Do you think these three officers would have been prosecuted back when you...
Of course, you can't say that in hindsight, but they certainly, I don't think they had a choice but to prosecute him now, or else the repercussions, they felt under pressure to do it. And if the sentences are enhanced because of it, it's probably because of what the public expects.
Yeah.
First of all, I still have great relationships with the police, because I always gave utmost respect to the police. If somebody came to me and said, hey, I want to nail this guy, I go, well, you're the one on the street that's risking your life every night. Or let this guy go. I think he's, I always deferred to the police, because I said, you're the ones that are putting your life on the line all the time. I had a great respect one time. I was doing a show in Pickering Wharf, and I saw this guy. He was an animal. He was taking 4 cops. He was fighting, screaming. 4 guys are trying to hold him down and everything. And when he came into court on Monday, as I go, that's the same guy. And he's dressed in a suit. Yes, sir. No, sir.
There you go.
And I go, you know what? Unless you saw what happened to these cops, and especially in the heat of the moment and making spontaneous decisions that you don't have time to think, and your own safety's at stake and whatever, it's hard to imagine what these police go through. George Floyd was no angel. He contributed to this too and everything. But suddenly, all of a sudden, he's a saint. They're erecting statues and murals to him and everything like that. And he was no saint.
Yeah.
He was no saint. He's just, he was a symbolic figure for people who were hating on the police at the time.
Right.
And this was the vehicle that they used to criticize them and supposedly get reforms or whatever. But yeah, I think politics definitely came into the picture here.
This is one of Dale's big issues, woke prosecutors. He loves woke prosecutors.
Oh, I love them. I don't love them, Paul.
What do you mean?
The prosecutors who, you have the 3 prosecutors, Alvin Bragg of Manhattan, George Gascon of Los Angeles, and Kim Fox in Chicago, how they will allow certain crimes, murders, to prostitution.
They're not holding people on bail who are reoffending again.
Absolutely.
People are getting out early. They're paroling people that shouldn't be paroled. They're out in the streets. I mean, they wonder why the crime's going up. Yeah, Kim Fox,
Chicago. There was a case with her where there was a gang shooting a few months ago, and the gangbangers are shooting each other, and one gangbanger kills another kid, and they knew exactly who it was. They brought him up.
They called it mutual combat.
Yeah, mutual combat.
Yeah.
So I guess gang members can just shoot each other. That's mutual combat.
Yeah, that's a wild one.
Yeah, so I don't know. Where do you think... Where does that come from? How could a prosecutor, because it's going to trickle down to cops, because if cops see that prosecutors aren't going to prosecute a case, then the cop isn't going to put his ass on the line to arrest the person.
Yeah, because this goes down the line, because the cops are reluctant to say, you know what, if I do something here, who's going to end up in jail? Me or the guy who's the offender here?
Absolutely.
I mean, all the scrutiny's on me. And that's another reason crime's gone up, because the police are going, well, you know what, I'm not going to get involved here because...
I'm not going to lie to you. That was my attitude the last year and a half on the police force.
Absolutely, yeah. So that puts a chill on all law enforcement.
Where do you think it comes from with the DA? How does a DA kind of rationalize that in his or her head?
Because they're driven politically and look at the cops as an enemy instead of the person that's enforcing the law. They're the enemy of the person. And the criminals are the victims. So you got a convoluted outlook on your priorities or and what's going on. So so you look at it through different colored glasses. You're looking at it as the cops are bad. You start out with that assumption, and this guy's an innocent victim, whether he's innocent because of his upbringing or because of poverty of his color or whatever. And you start with that assumption and then find a way to justify it.
This is the other thing one of the things we want to talk about. You dealt a lot with cops. As your prosecutor, the prosecutor deals with cops. The cop's got to deal with the prosecutor. There's probably a little friction on both sides. Cops lie. Cops lie. When you get a case and you look at it, do you ever, or when you would get a case, would you ever look at it and go, "Oh, he's fabricated this detail.
Let's put it this way.
Made this up."
You know what? Cops are like lawyers, are like manicurists, are like yoga instructors, are like teachers. There's good ones, there's bad ones, and there's a lot in the middle. I knew after a while, being able to read people and being a little savvy, I knew which cops were lying. I knew.
So you could read
sometimes.
report.
I knew the guys who were honest, and I knew the guys who weren't, and I took that into consideration. And you start to find out, certain guys were fishy and everything like that. And unfortunately, those are the type of people who give everyone a bad name.
Okay. What do you do about it? Anything?
What would you do if you read an officer's report and you could tell that he or she fabricated the probable cause to get into a car to search for drugs when in fact there was none? How would you handle a case like that?
Oh, in those days, I used to. I'd call them out on it. I'd call them out on it. People used to say, "Did you ever prosecute someone who you knew was innocent?" And I said, you know what? The only times I had a question prosecuting was a couple of sexual assault cases on children, where the wife, they were in a bad divorce and the wife hated the husband, and I questioned whether if she fabricated
I've dealt with
and
a lot
put
of
it
those
into
cases.
the kids. And those, I said, on the other hand, I dealt with thousands and thousands of people who I knew were guilty but walked.
Yeah.
And that's the way our system's supposed to be made up. I can't remember, other than those cases where I said, geez, I'm going to leave it to the jury because I don't know what the truth is in this matter. But me being in a situation where I knew the cop was blatantly fabricating some of the lying.
Yeah, so take back your statement that cops are liars, Dave.
Yeah, that's a blanket
I don't
statement.
appreciate it.
That's a blanket statement.
How about
Dave likes to get me going.
Some cops Some cops, this reminds me of the story that you told me years ago about the defense attorney who comes up to you and says his client who had been arrested for prosecution, she was a good girl.
For prostitution?
For prostitution. Freudian slip.
That lawyer is a judge now.
Is he really?
I won't mention his name, yeah.
Okay, can you tell the story? You know the story, right?
Oh, yeah. I was in a Peabody jury session, and I was with 3 Lynn police detectives that I knew well. And the lawyer came over, and he said, Paul, I've never really said this so adamantly before, but I know this girl is a victim of circumstance. She was in the wrong place at the wrong time. She's not a prostitute. And the cops were behind him, like shaking their head, going, he's full of crap, right? I said, really? He says, I said, look, we don't want to put her away, but maybe just, 6 months probation, pay a little fine or something like that. And we're not looking to put her in jail or anything like that. He goes, no, I want a dismissal on court cost. I says, let me talk to the cops. So I talked to the cops. They said, no, absolutely not, Paul. And I went over to the defense attorney. I said, in front of the cops, and they had no idea what I was going to say because I could tell by the look on their face. And I said, I'm going to strike a deal with you. I really don't buy your opinion that she's totally innocent. And I said, where is she? He pointed her out. I looked at her. She's a typical Lynn hooker. That's all I have to say, right? And I said, if you go over there, right, if you really truly believe she's innocent, if you go over here right now and give her a big, long tongue kiss, I will dismiss the case on court cost. He looked over and said, she'll take probation.
I love that story. As a cop, you get somebody, you've fabricated your information, you've got your illegal search, you've beaten a confession out of the guy, you bring it to the prosecutor, and he wants to let it go, or he wants to make a plea deal or something, and you as a cop get a little frustrated. Is that correct too?
I would think, well, the scenario you just gave,
maybe
I don't know how I could argue with that. But if hypothetically you do a drug bust, you have an undercover person on the street, they may buy heroin for a couple of times, and you have the guy with a good quantity of heroin, possession, distribute, then you put a nice case together, everything's tight, everything is squared away, everything is ready to go, you bring it to the DA's office, and a couple of weeks later, you find out the DA gives you a call and says, hey, unfortunately, there's a couple of holes in this case, constitutional holes in the case, and we're going to have to let this person go, or we're going to have to plea bargain down to a much smaller charge. So an inexperienced cop, young gung-ho cop, maybe a drug detective, might get pissed off and not understand why that would happen.
No, see, I one of the reasons I didn't have that problem, because there were a lot of DAs, I don't know if it was arrogance or what it was, condescension, whatever, where they would, where the cop would find out that the case got dismissed and without any prior knowledge. I never did anything like that without sitting the police down and saying, this is why I'm making this decision. And every time they walked away, well, thank you for being honest with me and explaining it to me. As long as you're honest with them.
What would be the reason?
I'll give an example. And
maybe the drug dealer was the DA's drug dealer.
I want to say, I had the detectives in Gloucester detectives one time. There was a case where the arresting officer went into a house and he did a search, and I tried to explain to him that he needed a warrant in this particular case, and he couldn't understand it. He couldn't understand it. And I said, it's a little thing called the Constitution. It's not just a boat in Charlestown, right? It's not just a boat in Charlestown, right? It's a piece of paper with, right? And in fact, I got in trouble with that because remember Barry Crimmins?
Yeah,
he was a very Cambridge left-wing political comedian. I worked that same week that case happened. I had my own show at Nick's in Boston. And I was doing, but this was a Friday night show. It was packed with 300 or 400 people. And they said, hey, there's like 100 Boston cops in the middle of 50 Boston cops, or whatever it was. And in the middle of the thing, I said, I'd like to say hi to the Boston police. I said, they think the Constitution is a boat in Charlestown. It was just a throw-out line that I had said from my case that week. And it wasn't part of my act, and it was a one-time thing, and I was just recalling what I said. Well, on the show that night was a guy named Randy Credico, who's friends with Barry Crimmins, and he was from New York. And he told Barry, and I got the most scathing thing on my answering machine saying, you stole my bit and everything like that. Well, I called him up, and I said, and he started yelling again. I said, please give me the courtesy of a response because you didn't you just leveled this accusation against me. Number one, I'm an assistant DA. The word Constitution comes up on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Number two, I'll tell you the circumstance in which it came up. Number three, it was a throwaway line for one night. It's not part of my act. And number four, as much as I admire you as a comedian, I don't know every single joke you ever wrote.
Oh.
And number five, it's not the greatest, stretch to associate the two. And he actually apologized to me.
He did? Okay.
And everything like that. But that's how, it's funny, but that's how that came up.
You may want to monitor. I'll do it for you because I go to a lot of Dave's shows. I will monitor that joke, and if Rattigan says that joke in the next week, I'll let you know.
And I will because number four is probably the hardest thing you can ever convince a comedian, that you don't know every single word from his act or her act. Hey, I talk about divorce. You can't talk about divorce. I talk about having a dog. You can't talk about having a dog. Let's go to this. Prosecuting pros, professional criminals, professional dirtbags, versus prosecuting upstanding citizens like myself or somebody else who don't have a record, and then all of a sudden they're busted for DUI, they're busted for, I don't know, maybe a domestic, I suppose. Is it any different in your eyes?
The driving unders were so, there was so much scrutiny, there was so much public was on it and everything, and all the laws were basically set out there. It was all mandatory. Everything was you didn't give any room really for discretion.
Yep.
Discretion up, but no discretion down from things. So that's probably not a good example. But on something else, of course, you take into consideration someone's background, if they're a productive citizen, if they have a record, if they you take that all into consideration.
I'm surprised with that being his baseline that you were never sent to jail, because I don't think you've ever been a productive citizen, have you, Dave?
Well, that might be.
You're doing pretty good now.
You know something? I just haven't been caught yet. But when I'm caught, it's gonna be a long stretch. It's just as soon as
the point he just made about
the advantage of having a mother who's so old that she can't walk down to her basement, because I got stuff down there.
Stuff hiding in the basement.
Down there.
Yeah. Paul made a point about DUIs. In 32 years, I made one DUI arrest. And the reason why was because the lady had $15,000 in cash all thrown in the backseat of her car.
And you saw it as an opportunity?
Well, and I saw it as, I think she was an accountant for an insurance company, and she was 2 a.m. I think she might have just, stole all the money from the safe and was split in town.
Was it all like in loose in the back seat?
It was all thrown in the back seat. She was
that's when I found the $12,000, the $9,000, $7,000.
Yeah, it was about $5,000. You're right.
She had almost $3,000 in the back
seat. How about laws you don't agree with? Are there any laws out there that you don't agree with and you put people away?
What about prostitution? I mean, not saying prostitution is right or wrong, but it's legal in a lot of states in this country.
I can remember. You just brought back a memory to me. I have great memories. I just can't remember them. But you brought back a great memory. I was in Salem jury doing a marijuana distribution case, and I had 2 bails that were evidence, Exhibit A and B, on the prosecutor's table, and 2 lawyers in the gallery when we took a recess, who are both deceased now. They both died young, but they came up to me after and they said, Paul, I don't think you realize it, but you keep leaning over and sniffing the bags. I said, sniff, and I'm trying to make a little hole so I can get a butt out of it. What are you talking about? Sniffing. I said, they're going to destroy it.
They burn it. In the police department I used to work in, we'd have the evidence guy once a month would take all the drugs and cases that had been finished and take them up to, I think, Topsfield or somewhere, and then burn them in the woods.
Okay.
That would be a good place to be downwind of.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I'm going to go burn these now. See you later. See you later.
Right off of 95 in Topsfield, Mass.
I'll help you burn them one at a time.
That's this is a good example of a drug that, it's no longer a crime to smoke marijuana, own marijuana.
It's not even any fun anymore. It's not like you're getting away with anything.
Taking it. Have you ever gone to? I haven't gone to one, but I have friends who go to dispensaries and they've all got funny names, like it's a Starbucks. You're trying to figure out what you're going to order, and it's
the craziest name I ever saw was God's Vagina. That was
that
was the name of a pot, and it wasn't even that good. You'd figure God's Vagina would be
the best you ever had, Dave.
Yeah. I don't know if God's Vagina.
Yeah, I'm just repeating. I didn't make it up.
That's a good name. How about the judges? And I know you got along with most of the judges, right?
Yeah. Well, judges like lawyers, cops. There's good ones, bad ones.
What if you got a bad one?
Oh, there were bad ones. There were bad ones.
When you say a bad judge,
yeah.
by the book or just doesn't care about the Constitution?
Bad. Well, I guess there's different variations of bad. One might be bad because he's clueless.
Yes.
I used to have a joke. I said there's 3 stages of judges. I said you become a new lawyer, and when you're first in front of judges, you look at them. They're up on the bench. It's raised above the floor, and you're looking up. They've got the robe. They're like a godlike figure. You're intimidated. Yeah. Going, oh my God, there's a judge, right? The second stage is you get to know the judges, and you go, hey, he's a normal guy. He likes to have a beer, watch a football game. He's one of them. Third stage is how the hell did he become a judge?
Yeah, when you're a judge, can you go out? I know sometimes the prosecutor, the attorney, the defense attorney, they might go out and get a beer or not a beer, but they might go out and get lunch. Do you ever go to lunch with a judge?
Well, the judges, when I was at the Salem court, we had Judge Finari, Judge Colicchio, and Judge Russo. And some Fridays they would cook up sauce. You could smell it, the whole down.
Tomato sauce.
Tomato sauce down.
He was wishing it was the weed, but
no. They would cook up sauce, and we'd go in there and eat. I mean, that's not out at a restaurant, but
right.
Yeah, that's. Do people go out with judges? Yeah, I suppose.
Okay,
yeah. You wouldn't go during the middle of a trial. I mean,
okay,
I wouldn't
that's
go.
The thing.
I mean, if I had a trial,
you wouldn't be seen.
No, that doesn't. Yeah. That's just a bad optic. That doesn't look good. Yeah.
But and the defense attorneys would go there too to eat. Were they invited, or was it just the prosecution and the judges?
I mean, I could be doing a trial and go to lunch with the defense attorney. I mean, it's lunch. I mean, if you get nothing nefarious that you're doing there.
Well, let me ask this question. As a former police officer, I was privy to people in the district attorney's office, defense attorneys, young female district attorneys, and advocates all kind of sleeping with each other. Can you elaborate on that, Paul? But is that like that everywhere, right?
I plead the Fifth Amendment.
All right, I asked the question. Dave wanted to know the answer.
It's a good question. He mentioned it. I was just thinking, I didn't want him about that one. But yeah, that's a good point because there are some good looking. I remember I've seen some good looking prosecutors.
Oh, I had the best looking office when I was in Peabody. We had like 5 between the victim witness advocates, the secretaries, everything. We had people love to come into my office. We had great looking girls. Yeah.
I bet they did. And the girls meet the lawyers and they think they're lawyers. They're lawyers.
No, not if they worked there for a while. Believe me, they don't get excited about seeing lawyers.
It's probably like the different.
Oh, he's another lawyer.
It's probably like the different stages. It's like when you first meet him, it's a lawyer.
Yeah,
and then it's like, oh, he's a nice person.
It's like with the judges. Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, he's horrible in bed. How about the cops?
Where the hell did that come from?
Like I said, I picked Dave out about 6 months ago. As a level 1 offender. Not level 3, level 1. Kind of a nuisance peeping Tom over there.
Well, here's my next question.
Oh, yeah, I definitely. Oh, yeah, I'm with you on that one. Yeah, I can see him. Yeah.
Do you think the cops have lost a lot of their appeal to women who work in offices like the DA's office since UPS has become more popular and they have 2 choices of men in uniform to go for?
I got to tell you something. I've done a million fundraisers for police departments where there's been police there, or going to events and gathering stuff. Police officers always had the hottest girls.
Yeah.
They always, oh my God, they always had the best looking.
Well, you stick around for a while, my wife will be coming home. Yeah. Dave always looks at her a little creepy.
I do. I look at her creepy.
Level 1's looking more and more likely.
But more and more.
We can bump them up to 2.
Maybe 1.5.
You have no idea, Paul.
Dave, 1.5.
How difficult it is to hand a woman's cell phone number back to her after she slips it to you in her living room.
Oh, touche. That's why he's a comic.
So back to judges. So when you've got a nitwit judge, or you've got a judge, and I don't know if this is true, but I've heard this from defense attorneys that there are some judges on certain types of cases, they'll just prosecute. It's just kind of a rubber stamp for the prosecutor. Yeah. And I know we've done stories.
Now, there's the difference between a good judge and a bad judge. Yeah. A good judge is if you're a prosecutor, that's a good judge. And if you're a defense attorney, that's a bad judge.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. But it's got to be the other way around too, right? There are some that are really lenient.
Without a doubt, yeah.
So
I mean, it's all, when it comes all down to it, other than sentencing guidelines and stuff like that, it's very subjective.
So how do you deal with a judge that you consider to be a nitwit?
You ask for a continuance and hope that there's another judge.
Yeah, they do that all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good strategy.
Yeah, sometimes you can judge sharp. Sometimes be able to. I can't imagine what the system's like now since COVID and everything and backed up.
It's got to be.
So your case probably isn't going to go for another few more years, Dave. So you'll be fine.
Yeah, I'll be all set. Everybody will be dead by that time.
Maybe the accusing party will be dead, or she'll just come up missing.
That would
under suspicious
unlikely
circumstances.
Unlikely that a 6-year-old would be dead in 5 years.
All right.
I think what do you think, Paul? Keep that in. That's a good joke. We're going to keep that in, Dave. I'm not cutting that out.
That's fine.
No, what do you got cutting out? This is gold.
Yeah. This is gold.
This is gold.
Gold. All right. I'm going to get to a real heinous crime. This is a real crime. It's awful. It made the news last week. A Las Vegas man, a woman sent her kid into elementary school with a note. The kid gave it to the elementary school teacher. It said, "I'm being held hostage in my own home by my boyfriend." The cops intervened. The woman is free. The man is in jail. But the real victim, or one of the real victims, not just the girl, not just the woman and her daughter, is the son was found dead in the freezer. Absolutely horrible case. And this is where I say, are there some people that cannot be redeemed?
Okay, I'll give you an example. There was one kid that I prosecuted as a juvenile in Salem court multiple times, and there was something about him. His eyes were like dead. He was this kid. I could just sense like evil. Eventually, he became an adult, and he ended up getting a life sentence for, I believe he beat a gay man to death.
Oh.
And he was given a life sentence, and eventually he was the person who killed Father Gagan in prison.
Wow.
Which, well, I don't know, maybe that's the only good thing he ever did, maybe. But there was something about this kid that was off that
I can't remember his name, but I believe that case happened in a place called Beverly, Massachusetts. I think
Duis. When he was a juvenile, he had a different name, and I don't remember what it was. But I think it was Duis was his last, Joseph Duis or something like that. That was
a case in the 90s, right? Late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah. No, I agree with him 100%. There are in law enforcement, and before law enforcement, I worked in the Department of Youth Services, and we dealt with hardcore offenders. You can usually, after a while, you get a little experience dealing with these type of people. You can look at them, their mannerisms, their facial expressions or lack of facial expression, look into their eyes. They're just cold.
Plus, to be honest with you, if you're in a court long enough, you see the same people come back.
Right.
You see the same people go over, oh, this guy again, and a lot of the serious crime is perpetrated by a small percentage of people who do it over and over again. So yeah, I suppose you can tell if somebody's off.
Yeah. But here's the question: if somebody's coming in over and over and over again, and let's say for violent crimes, let's say the violent crimes were a little bit worse.
They shouldn't be coming in over and over again because they should be in jail after like a couple of times. Yeah, but
that's the thing. It's like
nowadays, they're letting them out.
Yeah.
I mean, should they be? I mean, what should we do with them? Here's the other one: pedophiles. The rate of recidivism is not very strong with
sex offenders in general.
Sex offenders in general
is not very strong.
No. They don't. I'm sorry. They do.
They do. Yeah. You mean the opposite of that?
Yeah. I'm sorry. Whoa.
They can't be rehab.
It's good. One of us.
The rehabilitation of a sex offender.
No, sex offender. That's
slim to none.
That's something that's in your nature that you're not going to get rid of. You're not going to wake up one morning and say, "I'm not a pedophile." It's just unfortunately.
And the issue with pedophiles is oftentimes pedophiles were victims at one point of their lives, and now they become the perpetrator, and they're otherwise nice people. In fact, one of the reasons they get away with it so often is because their profile is so
they're very cunning and manipulative.
That's no different. I used to say this about
devious way.
I used to say this about like with people, individual responsibility. I said, if you were a kid and your parents beat you when you were a kid, I'm just taking a hypothetical. You can grow up to be one or two ways with your kids. You can either say, I will never let this happen again to my kids. I will never let them go through what I went through. Or you could be the weak type of person who says, my parents did this to me, and now I'm gonna make this perpetual. I'm gonna hand it down. I'm gonna do the same to my kids because this is the way this is what happened to me, and I'm still bitter about it and everything like that. So in that respect, you're saying, oh, this poor guy, maybe he was molested as a kid. Well, there's some people who are molested as a kid and they turn out to be
Right.
Productive citizens, and other people go the other way. So I think it's an individual thing.
Right. But if you look at our system of justice, it's built on the idea that you do your time to society. You serve your time to society. You come out, you can start again. Obviously, they don't get rehabilitated from this.
You can't rehabilitate that type of a mindset. You're not going to change someone's mind.
What do you do with them?
What do you do with them?
What do you do with somebody who's violent
your first responsibility is the safety of the public.
I guess the question is, if somebody is a pedophile, do you lock them up for life? If somebody is a rapist, do you just lock them up for life the first time in and just keep them in? And if somebody is one of these violent people who gets let out too often now, at what point do you take somebody who's violent and say, no more life sentence?
I don't know that the cops on the street don't have the answer, and I don't even think that the justice system has the answer. Does the medical field have the answer? I don't think anyone can give you an answer other than protect yourself. If you know that they're your neighbor or they're in your area where you live.
Which is the whole impetus behind this whole, register the sex offender.
Register sex offenders,
and everything. Be aware that this person's in your neighborhood or place restrictions on them. And, that's...
I don't think there's no answer to that. It's just, unfortunately, there's always going to be dangerous people, whether they're sexually dangerous or just violently dangerous out in the street.
There's variations. Every case is different, too. I mean, that's why every case, you can't make blanket assumptions about anything. You got to take into consideration the background, the nature of the case, how violent was it, how was... there's so much to take into consideration. I don't think you can just say there's one way to handle it.
Let's talk about dirtbags.
Oh, yes.
I know you were a defense attorney for a couple of years.
Yeah, a few years, yeah.
How'd you feel about defending dirtbags?
I used to say I did good things for bad people.
Okay.
And they're, again, putting cops on the stand that were my friends and having to make them look bad for the benefit of some idiot. And I'd look in the mirror and I say, I don't know if I did the world a favor. When I was a prosecutor, if somebody broke into houses, if they murdered someone, if they stole cars, if they did, I put them in jail and hey, I did a good thing, And defense attorney, there was a lot of times where I said, I don't know if I did the world a favor by getting this guy. I did like 24 motions and trials over the years when I was a defense attorney. I never lost one. It was a matter of time before I did, but that just happens to be the case. But I knew a lot of those people were guilty, that I got off. And sometimes I did the right thing. Sometimes it was the right thing to have them found not guilty, but sometimes it wasn't.
Yeah. Is that why you...
And I'm going, and then the final straw is I had a motor vehicle homicide case in Gloucester, and I'm representing the defendant, and all of a sudden I'm the bad guy. And I'm going, what am I doing, man? I could be working on a cruise ship. I could be in Vegas. And that was it. It was a turning point when I started to wind down my law practice and went out to Hollywood.
More fun to be the good guy.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, but I had friends who were defense attorneys, and they were not happy with what they were doing. I say, well, then why do you do it? And I got one kid at BU, and that's $50,000 a year, and I got a kid at Holy Cross, and that's $60,000 a year. And
that was a while ago. That was a while ago.
Yeah. Well, it was a while ago since I practiced. Yeah.
I think in law enforcement, as a cop, you go out there, you do your best. And sometimes you do make mistakes. You arrest people, or you ask certain questions, or you search certain areas because you don't want the evidence to go away, and you might make a mistake. And then you go up to trial, and the guy's guilty. You saw him drive the car into the wall. He was shit-faced. But fortunately and unfortunately, the Constitution protects everyone in the large scheme of everything. And some of those cases where a cop makes a mistake, you got to be able to bite it and say, something, we made a mistake. We know the guy's guilty. The guy knows he's guilty. The defense attorney knows he's guilty. But to keep everyone honest, sometimes you got to let the guilty guy go.
Oh, we touched on that before. And I said the way the system is built is better that 9 guilty people go free than 1 innocent person be convicted.
Right.
So a lot of the benefits accrue to the defendant, and that's just the way our system is made up.
Let's go to this. Court moments. Bizarre cases, funny cases, disappointing cases, any kind of noteworthy cases you want to share with us?
You asking me?
Yeah. I'm sure, certainly not asking him. He didn't make an arrest in 35 years.
Funny cases. Jeez. One of my favorites is in Peabody. There was an incident where they have a Portuguese club in Peabody, and two best friends who were best friends for what?
Oh,
What?
I know you've told me this story before.
Get this deal. So, best of friends for 35 years, whatever, getting totally shit-faced all day, drinking inside the club. They go outside at night. They're both taking a leak against the wall, and one friend makes fun of his friend's
we can say penis on the show. Yeah,
makes fun of his dick. So his drunk friend takes his jackknife out and cuts off his dick. Right, And he's charged with mayhem, assault and battery, dangerous weapon, mayhem and stuff like that. So we get ready for trial, and I'm prosecuting the trial, and I find out that the victim doesn't want to testify against his friend. He wants to drop the case. And I said, if anybody put chopped cheese next to my dick, I would hate him for the rest of my life. I says, you got to be kidding me. I says, so we came that day for trial, which I know was going to go south because apparently the victim wasn't going to cooperate with us, which I couldn't understand. But Judge Ruma said, I said, we're ready for trial, Your Honor. And Judge Ruma said, well, Mr. Prosecutor, we're going to have to continue this because we don't have a Portuguese interpreter. I said, Your Honor, I think I can interpret for this case. He said, you speak Portuguese? I said, I'm pretty sure the victim said, and he banged the gavel. I said, that's enough. You don't get stuff like that all the time. Some of the craziest cases I had involved animals. A diver taking lobsters out of a trap, or was accused of taking lobsters out of a trap, and the lobstermen trying to run him down. I'm
surprised they found that guy.
Attempted murder. They tried to run him down with the boats. The guy strangled the big talking parrot or whatever at the. What's the place up? Used to be the King's Grant. They had this beautiful, very expensive talking bird, and I think it was on a New Year's Eve. The guy.
He killed it?
The guy, drunk guy, went over and strangled the parrot.
Wow.
And had a whole bunch of, the environmental police taking short clams. I mean, one of the environmental cops jumping up on the hood of a car who'd taken short clams and taking his big service flashlight and smashing out the window while he held on to the windshield wiper. And I used to call him.
So he's trying to arrest the guy.
Yeah, I said small clams. I used to call him Magnum Foss. I used to call him. Yeah, so I mean, those are interesting.
A little
cases.
overzealous.
Yeah, a little over the top. That was not long after that.
You wouldn't say that if you were a small clam.
Go ahead. Yeah, we went to small clams court. Yeah. A little while after that, on the flats down in Lynn, an environmental police officer shot a clammer in the back. He claimed he tripped, and the gun went off, but he shot him from like 100 yards away or whatever. It was a pretty damn good shot.
Man.
Shot a clammer.
It sounds like he was probably doing a warning shot, and the bullet unfortunately hit the guy. But that's Lynn Police Department. That's 100% believable.
No, I think it was environment.
Environmental again. Okay.
Shooting a clammer?
Yeah,
but he said it
was an accident. Yeah,
he said it was an accident. What do you think?
I would be curious why he'd even have his gun out. Why would you have your gun out?
Yeah, because I tell you why. Because they were big clams.
Okay,
that's serious stuff.
No, it was short clams.
No,
it was small.
I know. I'm just saying it's a bigger stakes than just bashing somebody's windshield out. Those environmental policemen, they
that was.
I don't think you don't think about them being. I don't know what's the term. Dynamic. You don't think about them pulling their weapons.
That's why it was unusual. Yeah. Go, hey, it's clams.
I saw him shoot a poor deer one day at the beach. He was running wild on the beach. He took out his shotgun and killed it.
Yeah, well, that's a somewhat different story. I mean, that wildlife.
It was in the summer. There was probably about 100 people on the beach.
Wow, that's a really interesting call.
It was bad.
That's wild. So there were people who were going to get hit by the gunshot.
The gunshot was going toward the water.
All right, and so they felt the deer was.
Well, the deer was injured. It was just running haphazardly. It was a big deer.
So they were afraid it was.
If you've ever dealt with a deer, a deer will just run you down. It had the horns. They're called horns. Yeah. It was a situation. Antlers. There you go. Yeah. Dave's the devil. He has horns. But anyway, antlers. Yeah, it was a weird situation, but. I was just kind of a new guy, and I wasn't sure. But he said, "Yeah, deers they'll run right at you. They will spear you, and they'll go right for you."
Yeah,
so I guess he did the right thing.
I got I won an award once for writing a story about a deer that ran into a lawyer's office. It was a real estate lawyer. It was the end of the month, so they had a ton of clients in there in the waiting room, and they had a glass door, and it basically got discombobulated, ran through, smashed the glass, and then ran through the office, just banging around and scaring everybody, and nobody got hurt, thankfully. And somebody, I think they either opened a door or they ran through another window to get away.
Really?
But yeah. It's a crazy.
Well, the worst thing about my scenario was we had a police officer who loved deer meat. So as the deer's dead on the beach, he gutted it and sliced it open in front of all the kids and took the meat out.
Traumatized.
No, he didn't. Dave. I'm just kidding.
No, it's a good story. Good story. No, he did it in the truck on the side of the road. I used to consider it, when I started, I was a reporter and I was a comedian at night, same thing. And I always considered it a little bit of yin and yang, the dark stuff and the happy stuff. Sometimes I'm not sure which was the dark stuff and which was the happy stuff. Did you consider it yin and yang when you were comedian at night and prosecutor during the day?
Yeah, I had a lot of pressure and responsibility and on me during the day, and at night it was an escape. It was cathartic, I'd go out and I had to have a whole different mindset, and it was actually good. It helped. It definitely balanced out.
Did you ever feel like? Well, let me ask you this. I mean, obviously there were some light moments in the courtroom. That's the other thing I thought.
I got it. Yeah, admonished a lot.
Yeah.
Stuff. Yeah. I couldn't help it.
And you can't help yourself. You say things, and I would say things occasionally as a reporter, and I'd be like, I really shouldn't have said that. But did you ever have something that, I guess, again, yin and yang, serious, not serious generally, and it kind of...
Well, I did stuff in court when I used humor. Sometimes I use humor to make a point, whether it's in front of a jury or something or anything. But I never used humor in court at the expense of my responsibility for it. I made it interesting. And it spilled over for sure.
Yeah.
Sometimes the judge more than once banged a gavel, and I had an officer, he still tells the story. There was a trial, a drunk driving trial, and a woman defendant and a defense attorney. It was her first trial, and she was green, but she had a big chip on her shoulder. She was like, you'd think she had, years and years of experience.
Kind of like Dave's 3 ex-wives. Go ahead.
3?
Only two. Only a
2.
couple.
I'm sorry.
Only a couple so far.
So she was on the stand, and the defense attorney was very arrogant kind of state. And she said, "The officer said you went off, or you were wobbly when you were walking a straight line. Can I ask you, officer, you don't know what it's like. Was she wearing heels? She might have been. I'm not really sure." She goes, "And officer," I won't mention his name. He says, "Officer, you don't have any idea what it's like to walk in high heels, do you?" He says, "No, I can't say I do." He says, "No further questions." She slammed her book down, right? So I said, "Your Honor, I have just a couple questions." I said, "First off, Officer so-and-so," I says, "Are you sure you've never walked in heels before?" And the judge started banging the thing. I said, "I withdraw the question." The jury started laughing and stuff. He still tells that story. He was a Danvers police officer. Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
That's a great one.
That's great.
Oh, yeah.
All right. I think we're coming to the end. And Dale, anything I didn't ask that you'd like to ask?
No, I think you covered everything, Dave. You did a great job this week. We're going to keep you on for next week.
Thank you. I'm glad.
Keep going. You're doing good.
Makes me happy. Paul, you want to add anything?
No, just that this is really this is enjoyable. I like you dredged up a lot of old memories.
Yeah.
For me. Yeah.
Do you think the criminal justice system is going in the right direction or the wrong direction?
I'd say wrong.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're talking what Dale was talking about before. We got all these George Soros-backed prosecutors and stuff, and it's everything that I'm seeing is contrary to what I believe the justice system to be. So in that respect, and then you had the COVID, and I was hearing about trials getting postponed, and I was just talking to someone. People still call me up. "Hey, you represented my son." I said, 20 years ago. Would you go to a doctor who hasn't operated in 20 years? No. I says the things changed, everything, but said that he's being held pending a trial, and they have to release him after a certain amount of time, but it doesn't accrue the dates that the court was closed during COVID. And I guess the defense attorney went in there and said, "Well, it still counts as a day in jail for my client."
Yeah.
I mean, and so, I thought that was outrageous. I mean, what do you mean? You're not getting credit. You're still in jail, whether the court's closed or not.
Yeah.
And he should have been released from some reason. He should have been released in 120 days from this order.
Yeah.
And now he's like double that time because the courts were closed and he didn't get any credit for those days.
That's absurd.
So, do I think that, I'll tell you another thing too, and there's a difference in the court. Now, everybody I talk to in the courts, it's a different world now. I mean, we could make deals. You'd go out to lunch with defense attorneys, everything. Now they say everything's confrontational. Yeah. Dealing with lawyers who deal with insurance companies, you should be able to, work things out with an insurance company. He says the insurance companies are impossible to deal with now and everything. So, like anything else, it's just, I think it just gets worse and worse. But it's still better than any system in the world.
We say that.
Oh, what are you going to like?
I don't know. I'm not an expert on
the Afghanistan or something. They have a thing. Everybody comes up with a good example. It's not as big as 350 million people in the United States.
All right. How about Sweden?
Oh, geez.
How about Sweden?
There's no crime in Sweden.
How about
Dave?
Sweden? How about
no crime in Sweden?
You get convicted. You go to a spa. You get a massage from a tall, beautiful blonde woman.
If it was that easy, you'd be a pedophile in Sweden. Come on, Dave.
I'm a pedophile now from both of you. All right, fine.
Never been convicted, so you're not in the eyes of the law. Okay, Dave?
That's good. That's good. Don't besmirch my solid reputation.
My girlfriend said to me the other day, she heard about this couples thing. She goes, Paul, how do you feel about pedicures? I said, anyone who touches little kids should be shot.
Did she appreciate that?
She asked me if I wanted to do a his and hers pedicure. I said, I would rather listen to Mike Tyson recite poetry.
All right. That's it for this one.
That was fun.
Thank you. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, David. Sorry I was late.
Paul D'Angelo / Paul Murphy. Inside the Line, Real Stories by Real Cops. You can reach us at realstoriesbyrealcops@gmail.com. I'm Dave Rattigan, across from Dale Lawrence, retired police officer. This has been Inside the Line. Thanks for joining us. Share it with your friends. Thanks.